by Louisville Visual Art, and I'm your host, Keith Waits. Today I have three artists who are new members at Pyro, the co-op gallery in town, and they are new members who are going to all be showing together in an exhibit called All in the Process, which opens at Pyro on January the 6th. So let's tell you who they are. Mary Farnham Burnley is a Louisville native who studied at Murray State University, the University of Louisville, and the Rhode Island School of Design. She has exhibited in numerous solo and group exhibitions, and she's also taught art in Jefferson County at the high school level and adult classes through Louisville Visual Art, as well as children's fine art classes. Burnley has received numerous awards as included in the collection of universities, hospitals, and corporations, including the United States government, the Ford Motor Company, and Merrill Lynch. Also with us is Katherine Corcoran. She is a sculptor who describes herself as a constructivist. The Russian constructivist movement in the early 20th century was interested in moving away from paint on canvas, trying new ways to make art. She has worked designing exhibit space, fabricating custom trophies, and producing books for blind children. And finally, last but not least, Dessie Spears is from Corydon, Indiana. Before she retired, she was an equipment operator and operation engineer. She attended Ivy Tech for commercial art and began working as an artist for a display company in Louisville, Kentucky. At the age of 49, she enrolled into the San Francisco Academy of Art, majoring in interior design and architecture. So thank you all three for being with me. So the first thing I always want to start with is we're here to talk about this exhibit that you're in, or that's upcoming. It's not open yet, January 6th. So just because this is the sequence you are on my Zoom screen, Mary, we'll start with you. That's the sequence in which the intros went too. So Mary, let's start with, tell us what the work is from you in this exhibit, what we should expect to find there from you.
I paint landscapes from my own photographs. I've had the great benefit in the last 20 or 25 years of being able to travel. I have a friend in the airline industry. So airplane tickets are inexpensive. And I started painting from the photographs that I took. And about 14, 15 years ago, I did a show and I was just painted out. So I stopped painting and took up some other art experiences during that time period. And of course, like everyone else, 2020 shut me in the house with a lot of time. So I got back to painting. Really had to relearn how to paint and found that I really enjoyed it. And a few months ago, I started doing these little 2-inch by 2-inch bird's eye views of my paintings. I just took a little viewfinder, moved it around on my paintings, and found areas that I found particularly wonderful. And I turned those into 10-inch by 10-inch paintings. I then took those paintings as a springboard to paint larger paintings, changing the proportions and really extrapolating, changing the composition that had resulted from the 10 by 10. And from that, I really freed myself up to just explore the composition and the color and the paint, and I had a whole lot of fun. But I've resulted in a series of pieces that went from realism to pure abstraction. So for me, the process has been to explore the composition being fed to me by the landscape, something that I was seeing to something that I was inventing. So it's just been a real growth process for me the last couple of years.
Well, what's fascinating about that is that, I have talked to artists who paint abstractly and talked to them about what is, like, how did you get to that point? Because almost every abstract artist has gone through periods where they were painting representationally or realistically and moved to abstraction. And I feel like the process you just described almost sort of distills you know, what people maybe go through over a period of years, and you, with sort of almost a schematic or scientific approach, have done the same thing in a sort of a more concentrated period of time.
Yes. That's a real good description. Years ago, I took photography classes. I took some at U of L with Ted Wathen, and I bought a macro lens. So I got to looking at the world from 2 inches away. So this is kind of a return to that concept.
Cool. Well, let's move on so everybody gets time here. Katherine, same question to you. Describe the work that we'll find from Pyro from you.
Yeah. Well, when I'm working mostly with resins right now. I'm interested in paper, cardboard, coating it with resin, especially the paper. I can build an armature and form a shape over the armature. That's my process right now. And then I'll look at those parts and pieces and I put them together and make something out of it. It's pretty simple.
Now, when I was looking at the images on the Pyro website, are you entirely a sculptor? It seems like there were maybe some things that were maybe 2-dimensional, or at least a relief pieces. Or
there are.
Yeah.
I've been an artist since 5th grade, so I've tried it all. But I like sculpture the best. But yeah, there's some pieces there that are wall hangings. They might be 3-dimensional, but they're wall hangings. And I even have one piece that moves from the pedestal up to the wall because there's a wall hanging and a sculpture, both. So yeah, I mean, and every sculpture needs paint. So I'm a painter as well as a sculptor.
Right. Well, your sculptures are very colorful. They're not bronze or stone. They are materials that you can paint or that have color in them. It seems like, yeah.
I've done bronze. Yeah. I've done wood. Yeah. I'm just really interested in what I can do with the material I have at hand at the moment. And so I'm always looking for something different.
Cool. Well, that's what an artist is. The day you stop being curious is probably the day you take your last breath, right? So Dessie, right. Let's come to you now with this. Talk about your work in the exhibit.
Okay. Well, I about 4 years ago, took a big deep dive into the art. I just decided, I'm retired. This is what I've always really wanted to do with my life. So I took a intensive program called the Creative Visionary Program with Nicholas Welton. He's pretty well known. And I've done it every year for the past 4 years. So I really liked the program. And what it really did was kind of congeal everything that I needed to be reminded that I'd learned, previously, but since use it or lose it. So you need to kind of, so I could remember it in a cohesive fashion or whatever. But my work it's a lot of it is abstract, but I'm kind of letting a few representational things very lightly come back through. But I've done realistic and all those and tried everything through the years because I always have been laid off in the winter. And that's how I was able to carry my art forward with me, is because for a few months, I would have a moment that I could, reconnect with my passion, I guess. So I like to paint big, but I also dabble in some small things. But I work right now mainly in acrylic because it's dries fast. A lot of people don't like that, but I do because I work quickly and I have to be able to get right back to it and keep going, I guess. I don't know. But
I'm sorry, do you tend to start painting and go through until it's finished, or do you work on different pieces at the same time?
Oh, I always work in a series. You know, if you come to the show, you'll be able to see that, oh, she did this group together, because they'll be in the same, you know, have the same mood or feel or technique to them. You know, there's a lot of them. There's some that I have been very free, and then some you can see where I've got very contemplative, and then I've started to try to just go into the never-ending deep dive of color, and I like limited palettes, but I'm just so intrigued and amazed about all the different colors you can get from 3 colors. So that's just really, I mean, you can do it forever. I mean, it's amazing how many colors you can come up with.
Well, let's talk for a minute about Pyro. Now, all 3 of you have been working as artists for a long time. You may have been doing other things, but you've been making art for a good number of years. So why now? And Dessie will stay with you and then come back to everybody else. Why now join Pyro? How did it come to happen? And what do you see is the value of it for you right now?
Well, I always am going into art galleries and looking around, and I stopped into Pyro, and of course I've been exploring galleries through town and everything, but I stopped into Pyro and I got to talking to Deborah Lott, and she gave me the form, and she invited me to be in her guest at the invitational show last year. And so I did that, and then, you know, I was able to meet, you know, several of the artists and everything. And for the past 4 years, I've been kind of stuck in my basement by myself, and I was really looking for a community. And I've had online communities, but there's nothing like having actual people that you can really relate to and get, you know, up close and personal feedback from, that's not on a screen. So I was really looking for the community, and the caliber of artists that are in the Pyro Gallery to me is pretty amazing, and I'm very humbled to be a part of it.
Katherine, what about you?
Yeah, I like that. I like what Dessie said. I felt the same way. It was time for me to especially, well, I had just retired, so I was throwing everything at the wall, and I was bored at home. The only thing I had to do was artwork, and I was loving it. So I found Pyro 10 years ago, I guess. I exhibited there when Pyro was down on Main Street. And so I've been working with a body of work, and it was time to start showing it. I can't sell it from home. So I just decided to get out and start showing more. So
you were in that really great Main Street space that used to be Friedman Chapel.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful space.
Yeah, I've been showing just a couple of pieces here and there, but I never had a big body of work. Now since COVID, that affected me in a positive way. I was able to churn out some work. So yep, it's time to get out there and start showing.
Well, you know, early in the pandemic, when I found myself, and I think a lot of people, you started trying to look for the silver linings. And one of the things I thought was, for visual artists, you hate to think that it was a positive thing to be in lockdown, but it perhaps did provide an opportunity. This is kind of what you guys are saying, right? To really kind of focus in, like, you had nothing to distract you. You got to stay in, so you might as well be using that time. So I always thought it was going to be interesting to see what happens when things open up. is there going to be this explosion of artwork?
Uh-huh.
And I've heard that from a lot of people.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
so
yeah.
Mary, what about you? What's your relationship to Pyro?
Well, like most people who earn degrees in art, I also had another job, and I quit teaching to do art exhibitions around the country, the art fairs,
right?
And learned a whole lot about marketing art, and still managed to stay faithful to myself as an artist, not sell out. And got old. That's a hard way to make a living. So I opened a frame shop and started working almost exclusively with interior designers. It's a real easy way to run a frame shop because they're in and out, zip zap. They make their choices, and they don't hover over it for an hour and a half. And I met Erin Devine, the young lady that had Pyro on Hancock Street in the firehouse.
Right.
Okay. She thought it would be a real nice fit for a framer to have their shop in Pyro. And it is a great idea, but the hours were too short for me to make a living. I mean, I still had to pay the mortgage and the light bill. So I, at that point, was very interested in joining Pyro. In fact, I really, really wanted to, but I could not work within those limited hours. And I have followed Pyro for years. I've known people that have been members, and Pyro moved, and then they moved on my block, on my street.
Oh, you're a neighbor.
We're neighbors. I'm the one that can run down in the middle of the night to see if the water is leaking or something. And actually, I think that might be one of the things I offer to Pyro. But I passed my frame shop on to another person in January of this year, and the time was ripe. And then Suzanne Sidebottom, a Pyro member who's a clay sculptor, she does, come on, girls, help me out. Trompe-l'oeil, yes. We've known each other for a long time, and she invited me to be her guest at the Guest Watch show. And after that, I still kind of molded over for a couple of months and then applied to join in May. And Dessie's reason really closely duplicates my reason. I needed to be with people that were making art, talking about art, thinking about art, sharing sources, sharing materials. And that has been really beneficial to me. Tuesday at the beginning of the month, we hung the Off the Wall show, and everybody was in there. Everybody was chatting with each other. It was so much fun, and it really is a community. It's people that you can relate to and enjoy, and all of you contribute equally to the running of this wonderful little cooperative gallery.
Right. Well, do any of you think, like, having all of your work together? I know you have not hung the show yet, because as we're talking, as Mary mentioned, the Off the Walls exhibit is up, which is a when this runs, I think might still be up. It's a show representing almost all the members, right? It's like it's yes. A year-end kind of holiday
show.
Holiday bazaar.
Yeah, everybody that's a Pyro member has work in that. So
yes, and people can leave with their purchase at the time.
Right. You don't have to wait till the show's over.
That's right.
Because if they buy a piece of yours, you just go bring another piece out. Is that how that works?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, this will air after Christmas, so we'll have missed that. But there's always, what do you do with your after Christmas money? You got money.
Hey, go buy art.
In January for our show.
And then and then and then where Pyro is if you've never been there. So because it's an interesting space. In some ways, it's the most interesting of the four spaces, I might argue, but wherever you are is the most interesting space, I guess. So did you guys know each other much before you came together as Pyro members?
No.
No,
No, not at all.
We all joined at the same time, roughly.
yeah. That's
Which
when I
kind of-
met Katherine and Dessie both, was the opening for the guest watch show.
Oh, okay. But now, so have you interacted very much? Like, you're coming together, as the show is about being new members, but like, do you think all of your work, are there relationships between your work that you're interested in seeing how that happens in the gallery? What they do they speak to each other? Or do you think much about that? Have you thought anything about the work you're putting in relationship to the other artists' work? And Mary, I'll throw that to you first.
Okay, well, last summer we were all working together to get this show arranged. And Dessie and Katherine and I had a little laugh because I was working from representational toward abstraction, and Dessie was doing some work right then from abstraction back to representational. So it's like, it really is all in your process. And our two processes were reverse mirrored of each other. And I think that'll be interesting to exhibit in this show.
Well, and I think
I would like to say that earlier in the year in the members galleries, Katherine and I had a piece, and she had a piece of sculpture that was right next to it. And I thought they looked fabulous together because the colors just happen to play off of each other, and it just really worked well. So I'm very excited to see it all put together, because I think that, there's going to be, we're both all very different, but I think that juxtaposition is going to accentuate each other's work.
I feel that way too. I think it's going to be a good show because I'm working with two fabulous painters, and the sculpture thrown in there just gives us a little extra there, that our work is different, but yet I think it's going to be a fabulous show.
I think so also, where we had talked about hanging it not separated, but mingled. Hanging Dessie's work and my work and Katherine's work just mingled throughout the whole space. And I really like that idea. Three women coming together, making art, and not separated up into each separate little cubicle like we were during COVID.
Well, I was just thinking that because the Pyro space is divided up, like you can separate, and I was wondering if you're going to mingle. So that's interesting that you say that. I'm glad. I think that's a little bit more challenging and forces a conversation for the viewer between all the different work.
Yeah,
we're going to give it a try anyway. I think we'll be able to do it, but there'll be groupings, I'm sure, but
I'm not sure there's a wrong way to present art. I think there's always different ways, and anybody might think there's a better way than the way you chose to do it. But I think ultimately, it's up to you. You're going to make.
Well, I'm sure that we'll get a lot of help from the other members that have a lot of experience doing that, and I'm sure we'll take their advice, when we need it. So.
But those choices you make are as important a part of the exhibit as the work itself. I
absolutely. I believe so too. Absolutely. Because it really does. I believe that art really, how it's presented and where it's at and where what it's next to makes a huge difference in the impact that it makes.
And the way that when you work on a painting and it's at that stage where you need to make some decisions, but you're not sure which ones, and you leave it alone for 3 or 4 days and you walk back in and see it and you have fresh eyes and you can see what you need to do. I think looking at my work, then looking at Katherine's work, and then Dessie's, and then back to mine. Every time you get to each one of our works, you'll have fresh eyes.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
What I'm curious, Mary, I'm guessing not, but I think I would love to see it. Do you do anything to illustrate that process you described? Like, for example, I think it would be interesting to see the full painting that you began examining in that small way and see how it developed. I think it'd be interesting to see that comparison. Do you put that in your presentation, or do you not want people to see the source? Your source?
Oh, no, I love that idea. I am not committed to one media, one process. I think it's all fair game, but I intend to hang the whole series from the original representational landscape through the little 10 by 10 to the abstract. And I'd like to hang them in a grouping so that people can see the conversation. You know, the telephone game children play?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what I see it being hung like.
Adults play that game too.
Oh, okay.
They don't always know they're playing it. And
That's
Dessie,
called gossip.
Right, but we just don't want to teach children gossip, but they play telephone. I think it's an object lesson, but I'm not sure that it really accomplishes what it's intended to.
Yeah.
So I want to talk, Dessie, I've got to ask you about this experience you have had driving big earth moving machines.
Is there a tractor in the show? Is that what you're going to ask?
No, unfortunately, I did one time paint a painting very abstractly of me running an excavator, but I put it in the union hall where I worked, and they gave it to someone else, and it's gone. And I've given away all my, I have unfortunately given away all my work because I have drawn more than one piece of heavy equipment, I hate to admit.
So you were driving land sharks.
Yeah.
Land sharks.
Which
but I don't know. I just, during that time, I really kind of told myself that I was still an artist because I was shaping the earth. And what I did was a lot of the finish work. So when you see the slopes and the ditches and everything, you know, at the very end, that was my favorite part of the process. I was obviously a part of it all, but the finishing was where I really, you know, felt like I was, that feeling you get when you finish a painting.
Well, and you worked on I want to say recent, but I guess it's starting to not be so recent. The bridges project when the new bridges were built, and the way all of that.
Lincoln Bridge, right? And that's the name of it. The Lincoln Bridge.
Did you work out on the East End too for the?
I worked for 7 months on the Kentucky side, and then I spent 3 years working for Milestone on the Indiana side. And went right up to the bridge, all the way to all of the intersecting roads and the different things that happened over in Jeffersonville and Clarksville. I was highly involved in.
So millions of people have viewed your work, thousands of them each day.
Yeah,
right through that whole.
If you go through there, I was in the middle of it.
Earthworks.
Yeah. Well, I know you didn't design it, but I will say I thought that most of the work on both sides, you know, aside from the bridge itself, all the approach, I thought, gosh, it just made the whole experience of driving through Spaghetti Junction so much better.
It really has improved
so
the
much nicer.
Traffic flow for sure. I mean, I used to get mad at people because they didn't like the tolls, because I'm thinking you're spending that much in gas sitting in traffic, because I was always, you know, late to work trying to get somewhere, you know, trying to get to work, you know, because I was stuck in traffic. But now I'm like, okay, I'm tired of these tolls too.
Yeah.
But It is what it is.
Well, I always question about tolls is they say we're going to have the tolls to make the whatever 5 million or 10 million, whatever the number is, that the help and the costing. One, like, when you hit that number though, do you shut down the tolls or do you just keep going?
Right.
And I think it's fine if I knew that every penny was still going to, let's say, a fund that would maintain those bridges, since bridge maintenance has been such a big deal in this community for the last several years.
Yeah.
And it still is.
Yeah, ongoing.
Yeah, so we digress a little bit, but I just think it's interesting, because so many artists have other jobs, and there's not really a relationship many times, or some people teach, which and then there is a relationship, but I just thought it was interesting to see, like, if what in your own mind, and you've answered the question, I think, what in your own mind was that about for you and like for you. Have you ever thought about doing like a big earthwork sculpture, just like if you had a place to do it and put those skills to use that way?
Online in one of my communities, there was a sculptor, and she had the figure of a woman inside what looked like a dozer track, crouched up in it, and she was enveloped in that track. And I was like, and she was over in England, and I was like, oh, I've got to have that, because my life I've felt like I was inside that track. So, what I think that I might explore a little bit is how it felt some way through art, how it felt to be a woman in a man's world. And
Right.
Also for the men, how it was to have a woman come in and encroach, because that was their world. And then all of a sudden, well, who's this, and why is she here? And how can this be? Especially back in the beginning. So, I've been thinking a whole lot about trying to somehow, how would I put that feeling into art and have it some way be somewhat recognizable. So I don't know.
Maybe you could collaborate with Katherine, who is a sculptor.
We could definitely.
Absolutely.
I would like to show you that picture of that piece, because I was like, oh my gosh, I want that so bad, because they always say you don't fit inside the box, and there she was inside that track. So it was like, oh.
Well, so now that you're Pyro members, then you're on the schedule, right? That you get to, what is it, every 2 years you have a slot?
Yes.
Yeah.
So does that mean that each of you won't have a slot? Like, you obviously, all three of you don't wait 2 years because you've already shown together. I mean, like, do you know when your next time to exhibit will be?
We're on the schedule for 2024. Katherine will have a solo show unless she invites someone to be with her. And Dessie and I are slated to have a show together again.
Oh, okay. Well, and because you all talked about how you had been, I think all three of you said you had been invited by a member to show with them in a previous time. Is that sort of, are the members knowingly inviting people thinking that they might be good for future membership?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the reasons. It also opens up everyone they know to being familiar with Pyro.
Okay, well, great.
It works both ways.
Well, so I think that about wraps it up for today. And I want to thank you again. Let me just run through. We've been talking to Mary Farnham Burnley, who is a painter, currently abstract, Katherine Corcoran, who is a sculptor, and Dessie Spears, who is also a painter. But they've all done different things. This is what they happen to find themselves doing now. It's kind of, I feel like, a little bit of the reality here. They are all new members at Pyro. Their exhibit, in which they are presented as new members together, is all in the process. It opens on January the 6th at Pyro Gallery, which is on Washington Street there in in Butchertown.
Butchertown.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a artist talk on the 15th.
Okay.
So we'll all be there to answer questions if you have questions about our work. So
thank you, Catherine.
Yes, thank you. Those are good things to know. Pyro is very good about that, and other galleries do too, where there's an opening, but there's also an opportunity later to come and listen to artists talk. As we all know, the openings are always fun, but particularly the more you want to have a good turnout. But it's often a question if people are really getting to look at the work properly, spend time with it, which I always think is an important thing. I'm one of my things I preach, I say almost every episode is websites are great to introduce you to people, but you need to go and be in the room with the art. It's essential, but also to take some time. I've seen so many people rush through galleries like, okay, saw that. I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't really see that. You didn't really take. And I think when people talk about abstraction or things like that, and they think they don't get it. It's like, well, I find abstract work is the thing that you should spend the more time with, because the more, if you just let your eyes fall on it, you take the time with it, you start to see something, and you might walk away and only later kind of, it gets in your head. So yeah, it's one of the things, it's one of the values of galleries too, is that so much of our cultural or entertainment experience is fast all the time. And a gallery is a place to come and slow down and be thoughtful in how you interact with art. So, but that's my soapbox. I'll get off it now. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for the invite. We enjoyed it so much.
Okay.
Are we off the air?